If you've ever wondered how love, power, and fame can collide in the most devastating way, look no further than the story of Sondra Locke and Clint Eastwood. It's a Hollywood romance that started with promise, turned toxic, and ended in betrayal. One that left Sondra Locke's career in ruins, and her name quietly erased from the very town that once embraced her. Before Clint Eastwood ever came into the picture, Sondra Locke was already making waves. She was born Sandra Louise Smith in 1944 in the small town of Shelbyville, Tennessee. She was smart, artistic, and determined to escape the ordinary. After college, she packed up and chased her dream of acting, first to New York and then to Los Angeles. In 1967, at just 23 years old, she married her close friend, Gordon Lee Anderson. But this wasn't your typical Hollywood marriage. Anderson was gay, and their relationship was never romantic. They were best friends, kindred spirits, and for reasons only the two of them fully understood, they stayed married for the rest of her life. They never divorced, not even after she moved in with Clint Eastwood years later. She once described the marriage as spiritual, saying Gordon was her soul companion, even if they weren't together in the traditional sense. A year after their marriage, Locke caught her big break. She landed a leading role in the 1968 film The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, opposite Alan Arkin. Her performance was brilliant, subtle, emotional, and way beyond her years. It earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Practically overnight, she went from unknown to one of Hollywood's most promising young stars. But then came Clint Eastwood. In 1975, Locke auditioned for his film The Outlaw Josie Wales, and that meeting would change the course of her entire life. Eastwood was already one of the biggest names in Hollywood, a box office powerhouse with an untouchable reputation. He was married at the time, though his marriage was strained, and soon after casting her, he and Locke began an affair. Their chemistry was undeniable, and by the late 70s, they were living together. Over the next decade, Locke appeared in several of Eastwood's films: The Gauntlet, Every Which Way But Loose, Bronco Billy, and Sudden Impact. And for a while, it seemed like the two were unstoppable. To the outside world, they looked like Hollywood's golden couple, the rugged cowboy and the graceful blonde actress who softened his edges. But behind the scenes, things weren't so idyllic. Locke's career began to revolve completely around Eastwood. Studios saw her as his partner, not as her own person. Some even whispered about nepotism, suggesting that the only reason she was getting roles was because of him. But Locke had dreams that went beyond being someone's co-star. She wanted to direct, to create, to have a say in her own career. But that didn't sit well with Clint Eastwood. According to Locke, he could be controlling in their home life and in her career. In her memoir, The Good, the Bad, and the Very Ugly, she wrote that he dictated nearly every part of her life, from the projects she worked on to decisions about whether they should have children. She claimed that he pressured her into multiple abortions, always promising they'd start a family someday, but someday never came. By the late 80s, things were falling apart. Locke's career was slowing down, and her relationship with Eastwood had soured completely. Around that same time, Eastwood was presenting himself as a civic leader, even running for public office. In 1986, he was elected mayor of Carmel by the Sea, a small picturesque coastal town in California. It was a 2-year term, and he won by a landslide, promising to bring common sense to local politics. To the world, Clint Eastwood was a respected figure, an actor, director, and now mayor, who seemed to have it all together. But behind closed doors, his relationship with Sondra Locke was crumbling. The contrast between his public image and their private turmoil couldn't have been sharper. In 1989, Locke came home one day to find that Eastwood had changed the locks on their shared house. Her belongings had been packed up and placed in storage. That was how their 13-year relationship ended, abruptly and without warning. Locke was furious, but more than that, she was heartbroken. She filed a palimony lawsuit, claiming that Eastwood had promised to support her financially and help her continue her career. Eastwood, in turn, wanted to settle the matter quietly, so he arranged for Warner Brothers to give her a 3-year development deal, a chance, supposedly, for her to direct and produce films under the studio's banner. On paper, it looked like a fair resolution, but it wasn't. Locke soon realized that the deal was a sham. Every project she pitched was rejected. No one would take her calls. No one would greenlight her scripts, and the studio didn't assign her any internal projects either. Years later, she learned why. The entire deal had been secretly funded by Clint Eastwood himself. He had paid Warner Brothers to keep her under contract, essentially paying them to do nothing with her. It was a silent way of cutting her out of Hollywood without leaving fingerprints. By the mid-1990s, Locke was determined to fight back. She sued again, this time accusing Eastwood and Warner Brothers of fraud and interference with her career. The legal battle unearthed uncomfortable truths about how Hollywood works behind closed doors, how power, influence, and money can be used quietly to destroy someone without a single word ever being said publicly. The case never went to trial. Eastwood settled out of court once again, reportedly for a large undisclosed sum, but by then it didn't matter. Locke's career was finished. The studios saw her as radioactive. She had gone up against one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and no one wanted to risk hiring her after that. She did, however, make a few small films later on, but the major offers never returned. The woman who once earned an Oscar nomination and starred alongside a Hollywood legend was now largely forgotten. When she died in 2018 from cancer, she and Gordon Anderson were still legally married. Her obituary made only a brief mention of Eastwood, but her story has endured as one of Hollywood's most haunting cautionary tales. Looking back now, Locke's relationship with Clint Eastwood was supposed to be a partnership, but in the end it became a reminder of how quickly love can turn into control. She once said, "I loved Clint very deeply, but it was the kind of love that made me forget who I was." And that may be the most tragic part of all, that a woman with so much promise, intelligence, and drive had her light dimmed, not because of failure, but because she fell in love with someone who held all the power.